位听众朋友大家好，欢迎收听这一集的军事相对论，我是向正维。2022年2月24号，俄罗斯挥军入侵乌克兰，彻底改变了乌俄关系，还有昔日东欧苏联国家的危机感。这场战争呢，也改变了全球强权的版图以及能源跟粮食安全。简单来说它的影响层面既深又广。但是令人遗憾的是，乌俄战争还没有停止的迹象。俄罗斯到底在打什么算盘？还有乌克兰人要如何继续反抗下去？对全世界跟台湾来说，可能还会有哪些的影响呢？我们军事相对论针对乌俄战争1周年将会进行不同层面的讨论。我们今天邀请的是乌克兰国际局势专家，目前也是国防安全研究院的客座研究员尤里波伊塔来跟我们分析。Hello, Mr. Yurii, welcome to our podcast.
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here.
好，我们想先请尤里先生帮我们简单的介绍一下，您究竟在台湾做哪些的工作 ？First of all, could you please introduce yourself? That what do you research in Taiwan?
I'm a Ukrainian research fellow. I'm working for a few different think tanks in Ukraine for different projects. First of one is Center for Army Conversion and Disarmament Studies. It is a think tank that focusing on defense, military, etc. Another one is New Geopolitics Research Network. It is a think tank that is researching policies, economies, hybrid influence, information warfare, and stuff like that. Furthermore, I am a future fellow at Mercator Institute for China Studies. This is the biggest institution, think tank in Europe. And as you mentioned, I joined Institute for National Defense and Security Research here in Taipei as a visiting research fellow, where I research China-Ukraine relations, Chinese foreign policy, and of course aspects of Russian-Ukrainian war and its implication for Taiwan, what lesson Taiwan could learn from this terrible and tragic war scenario.
Very nice. 但是很遗憾的乌克兰经历了1年的战火，它目前还在承受俄罗斯的威胁。而且根据美国外交政策杂志的报道，乌克兰的情报显示说，俄国正在大规模集结，包括1800辆坦克、4000辆装甲车等等的，还有包括战机、直升机，要再进行一次大规模的攻击。So do you think that have Russia already started another big scale invasion? What and how do they plan to do it?
Actually, let me explain maybe in more detail. So we in Ukraine, we are very, very carefully in terms of defining, in terms of definition, how to call invasion, crisis, war, or etc. Because we here in Ukraine don't call it another big-scale invasion. It's not another big-scale invasion because invasion already starts in 2014 from the annexation of Crimea and then annexation of part of the Ukrainian Donbas. It's very important not to underestimate the Ukrainian losses since 2014 and not to underestimate the participants of Russia in this war. So in 2022, 21st February, we call it full-scale war or full-scale invasion. And it had different stages, different parts. So the first one was kind of blitzkrieg and attacking Russia to Ukraine from 9 directions at the same time. And it is failed. Then it was a so-called main battle on Donbas. And Russia tried gradually moving forward, but it also failed. Then it was kind of game-changing due to the delivery of HIMARS system to Ukrainian armed forces. And Ukraine started to do offensive operation, counter-offensive operation, and liberated about 50% of territory that was occupied since 2022. Then Russia switched to another tactics. So Russia couldn't win Ukraine on the battlefield, and Russia used massive missile attack against Ukrainian critical infrastructure, against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, in order to make the life in Ukraine impossible, unbearable, to make this genocide and to switch off Ukraine from electricity, from this stuff. So for the time being, what we observe on the battlefield for the time being, so Russia accumulated the huge amount of tanks, armored vehicles, troops, etc. So Russia already mobilized more than 300,000 people and trying to break through Ukrainian defense. Offensive already going on, so it is already started. But what we see on the battlefield, there is a huge and very fierce battles, very active battles. But we don't see the victory of Russia because, for instance, just 2 days ago, near the Vuhledar city, Russia lost about more than 100 armored vehicles, including
100.
100 armored vehicles during just few days, and more than 30 tanks. 30 tanks, it is one battalion just for a few days. So Russian losses on the battlefield still huge. So we do have cautious optimism that Ukraine could defend its territory and gradually building up its defense using weaponry from the West.
This is the question I want to follow up. 其实我就是想要再继续问这个问题，我也蛮好奇的因为其实俄罗斯再一次大规模入侵的这个传闻，我记得我从去年就一直听到现在，这个传闻一直没有停过。但是我比较好奇的是，俄罗斯他们还有这种能力吗？因为我去年6月去乌克兰拜访的时候，那时候就已经听闻许多在俄罗斯前线的部队他们精锐部队大部分都已经战死在沙场上。那后来派上来的人呢，不是既年轻没经验，要不然就是又老，要不然就是佣兵。So after so many battles and men's losses, do you think Russia still have the ability to do another attack?
Here we have to admit, and from my point of view, it is a very valuable lesson that also Taiwan could learn, that Russia is not sensitive to its own losses. So we in Ukraine...
He's not sensitive?
Yes, is not sensitive to its own losses, to losses of its people. So before full-scale invasion in Ukraine, Ukrainian government mainly assessed the possibility of Russian, this war kind of in very, very not likely, because we did understand that it would be a huge losses on the battlefield and Russia will not dare to do it. But it was actually the mistake of Ukrainian government. And here we have to say that Russia doesn't care about its own people. So Russia could send 1,000 and even hundreds of thousands troops on the battlefield kind of without any preparation. So it gives Russian government an opportunity to continue this this war for the long period of time. The second one is that ideology is crucial here. So we do observe that Russian government still has this ideology of expanding its zone of influence and destroying Ukraine as a country and as a nation. And here ideology is much more critical than national interest, than rationality. And it also makes Russian government to continue this war. Another point is that nothing threatens regime, so inside and outside for the time being. So there are few points that we have to take into account, and here we have an assessment that Russia is going to continue this war. But we do have, as I want to repeat that we do have cautious optimism on the Ukrainian victory because we are observing building up our defense and our military are becoming more stronger. Morale is very high, and government and people, armed forces are very, very much united. And this is, from my point of view, is crucial, and it is very significant advantage of Ukraine over Russia.
所以刚刚这个尤里先生提到一个非常重要的点就是今天战争打到现在，他们能够继续坚持下去，很重要的一个原因是从政府到民间大家的一个决心，这个反抗的意志。那我们也看到了乌克兰总统泽伦斯基，他也前进到了西方国家去要求更多的武器。So President Zelensky visited the United Kingdom and other European countries to ask for more like fighter jets or other weapons. So how do these weapons play a crucial role in defending Russians?
So visiting of Zelensky in European countries, from my point of view, is crucial. It's very, very important. And there are about two main goals. The first one is consolidation of the world for support for Ukraine. And we can observe how effectively, how sufficiently Mr. Zelensky does it. So many people and many governments already support Ukraine in very, very large scale. And we have to admit here that very bright example of its leadership and how he shared its charisma, how he could persuade people, and how people treat him. Another main goal, of course, is military. For the time being, military security is number one priority for Ukraine.
Yep.
Of course, Ukraine needs all components for building up its defense, for strengthening its defense. It includes air defense and fighter jets and tanks. In terms of tanks, already created a so-called tank coalition. Tank coalition. So many countries are ready and for the time being and already are providing Ukraine with main battle tanks. So in terms of air defense and fighter jets, we should understand that fighter jets are one of the element of the defense. So without dominance in the air, Ukraine cannot conduct this deoccupation, liberalization of its own territory. it's very much needed. Another thing that it could significantly strengthen Ukraine defense system, because it's one of the key element of the defense system. And another thing is that existing Ukrainian fighter jets in Ukrainian Air Force are already worn out because they are Soviet made. There is and pilots are using them actually in bad conditions. So Ukraine need to replace to replace its Soviet fighter jets to the very sophisticated, and it also will give an advantage for Ukraine because F-16, for instance, are very much sophisticated comparing with Soviet-made system with better equipment, better radars, etc.
So it seems like Putin will not give up his ambition. 那我看起来这个普丁并没有想要停止打算。那对乌克兰来说，他们要如何来终结这场战争，或是对他们来说，什么样才叫做战胜 ？So for Ukrainians, how do you define the victory? So does that also include getting back Crimea?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are different dimensions of defining victory. So in terms of military, in terms of, we call it civilizational also, because Ukraine not only have to win this war, but also to create very sophisticated democratic countries, very friendly to its own people, very good environment to overcome this corruption, etc. So if we, to make a long story short, and if we just pay attention on maybe bullet points, so the first one is, of course, it is restoration of Ukrainian territorial integrity, including Crimea, including all of the Ukrainian occupied territories since 1991. Ukraine need to bring Russia to responsibility. I mean, to bring in Russia to be responsible for its invasion, for its war crimes, etc. Then another aim is to force Russia to pay reparation for the damage that Russia caused. You know, dozens of cities, of huge cities, was just ruined, burned down. So people were killed. Who can pay for that, and how much does it cost? For instance, how much Mariupol city cost? So it's a huge amount. It's a huge amount, and someone should be responsible for that. Another one, of course, is Ukraine needs very much join European Union and NATO. It's a crucial element of economic stability. It is a driver of development, of economic development, etc. And also it is a driver of security stability. Without joining this organization, this war could be lasted for decades, even decades. It's because Russia still has much more resources, much more people, etc. We see that their ideology doesn't change. Another, the absolutely new security architecture in European region, including Ukraine as a core element of this security architecture, should be created.
所以当乌克兰他们急于想要加入北大西洋公约组织来形塑他们自己的安全防御的时候，其实我们也看到俄罗斯它有一些动作，它规划在今年春天邀请中国国家主席习近平去访问莫斯科。那其实我们也好奇说，在乌俄战争当中，中国到底扮演什么样的角色？还有他们到底想要拉拢习近平在未来的关系当中能够做些什么事情 ？So as you know, what kind of role does China play in the Ukrainian war? And also, do you know that does China really offer some supports to Russia?
Yes, absolutely. We do observe very closely, very carefully Chinese possible role. Actually, Ukrainian government is not very happy about the current Chinese position, but for Ukraine government, it is kind of okay. It is acceptable because until China deliver military aid or military technical aid in terms of, the huge amount, especially UAVs or maybe, MLRS, this or artillery system, etc. So until China doesn't provide Russia with this weaponry for Ukraine, it is kind of okay. But we personally also observe that China continues to claim that it plays so-called constructive role in Ukrainian crisis. And we define this Chinese position as pro-Russian neutrality. And for instance, in Russia, a Russian expert defined this position as friendly to Russian neutrality. It means it is not neutrality, so it's something much more closer to Russian Federation. So what does that mean, pro-Russian neutrality? Firstly, China always says that it supports territorial integrity, independence of Ukraine on the one hand, but on the another hand, China never criticizes Russia for its invasion. China deepens its relationship with Russia, including economic, political, diplomatic, and military. Another one is China actually supports Russia in all international organizations, including United Nations and others. And then Beijing always blames United States and NATO for this invasion. So, it's a kind of switching or changing responsibility from Russia to the United States and NATO. then Beijing always criticize imposed sanction on Russia, criticizes sanction, and criticize the delivering of weaponry to Ukraine from the West. And, when we talk with Chinese experts and they said, it's the United States responsibility for this crisis, and United States could very easily stop this war. And then we, by just stopping delivering weaponry to Ukraine, and we then ask them, so do you mean that United States should stop delivering weapon for Ukraine? It means that Ukraine will gradually be defeated. Yeah. So do you think, is it Chinese interesting that Ukraine should be defeated and Ukraine should be kind of destroyed as a state and as a nation? So this is a question to what we didn't get an answer actually. To conclude, we do believe that actually China is kind of interested in Russian victory. Even if China doesn't provide full-scale support and provides some limited support, but we do believe that the interest of Russia and interest of China in terms of reshaping global order to its own benefits is coincide.
So after 1 year war with Russia, so what have the Ukrainians learned from the war?
So actually we learned lots of lessons, and we are continuing to learn this lesson because the war is continuing. There are absolutely new dimensions are appearing, etc. So actually, from my point of view, maybe the main lesson are how to build and maintain leadership. Because leadership is crucial. It's not only about the presidency and leadership of the state, but also leadership on the local level. It is readiness to take responsibility, to be initiative, to do something without any orders from heads, etc. And it is very crucial to unite society with government, to unite different groups of society, etc. Another lesson is it is in terms of military, how to organize decentralization. Because one of the advantages of Ukrainian armed forces is their flexibility, is a readiness to act without any order, because during the wartime, especially during the first few days of invasion, Ukrainian headquarters of armed forces was kind of overwhelmed by information, overwhelmed by tasks. And it was very important for local units to independently conduct military operation, independently organize logistic, conduct offensive, defensive, etc. So it is very much coincide with decentralization and flexibility. And why I mentioned that Russian, for instance, problem was a huge centralization, kind of vertical system, and without order from the headquarters, they just didn't know what to do.
Right?
How to do, what to do, etc. They didn't want to take responsibility because they could be punished for making the wrong decision, etc. So another lesson from my point of view, it is how to protect critical infrastructure, because we do observe that Russian invasion not only targets military people and military facilities, but also targets civilian facilities. And here it is very much, it is absolutely important to organize very flexible system of protecting critical infrastructure in terms of electricity, water supplies, food supplies, etc. And another one, maybe last but not least, it is, mistakes that Ukraine made. So Ukraine underestimated before this 24th February, Ukraine underestimated that this full-scale brutal war was very, very possible. Actually, Ukraine didn't build up very sophisticated navy, air defense, missile system, long-range missile system, etc. So deterrence of Ukraine against Russia, strategic deterrence, had a huge mistake, and it failed. So it is also one of the lessons that eventually Ukraine should learn.
简单的总结一下刚刚尤里先生讲的几个重点。第一个是要巩固所谓的领导阶层，不管是总统阶级或是到地方政府。那另外一方面，他也希望我们在军队上面能够有更多弹性。像俄罗斯他们这种一元化的这种中央领导政策呢，可能会导致地方的或是基层部队他们不敢行动。另外一方面的话，也要保护我们的基础设施，还有他们犯了一个大错，就是他们低估了俄国全面入侵的重要性。那我们就想问看说，那您有没有给台湾朋友的一些忠告跟一些建议 ？What is your message to the Taiwanese people?
I think that Ukraine and Taiwan here has very much in common. In terms of, especially in terms of confrontation, a much more powerful enemy. And I believe that Ukraine and Taiwan could learn from each other very much. So Taiwan is already learning from Russian-Ukraine war very many and already adopting its foreign policy, already adopting, I can observe, already adopting its, defense system, especially when it comes to asymmetric warfare, when it comes to Z systems that were very, very effectively used on the Ukrainian battlefield. But here, Ukraine also has to learn very, very, very much from Taiwan, how to build an effective economy, a high-tech economy, how to integrate itself to the global chain supply, how to be flexible, how to react quickly, etc. So here and Taiwan, from my point of view, have huge window opportunity to develop its relation. Finally, we do believe that Ukraine is going to win this war and Ukraine is going to become a new economic and military tiger in the European region because, Ukraine already has the strongest army in the European region. And to feed this army, to feed this huge defense expenses, Ukraine needs to have a sophisticated economy. Ukraine cannot always rely on the Western aid, Western donation, etc. So Ukraine should be self-sufficient, independent, self-sufficient country. Absolutely new type of economy should be created in Ukraine because the previous one was based on the raw materials export and it cannot, survive. So here Taiwan has technology, Taiwan could help Ukraine to integrate into this global chain supply. On its hand, Ukraine also could share a lot with Taiwan, especially when it comes to, what I mentioned, defending its critical infrastructure, how to build up effective armed forces, how to integrate society and armed forces together. So there are lots of lessons that Ukraine could share with Taiwan. And of course, if it is rebuilding of Ukraine, if it is post-war recovery of Ukraine, it will be created a platform of economic cooperation on the Ukrainian territory, of technological cooperation. And I believe it is absolutely beneficial for Taiwan to get involved in this process and to get involved in this cooperation, to share its experience and also to learn from other countries and also being involved internationally in this process. I believe this is could be one of the key priority for Taipei.
我想说今天能够跟尤里先生对谈是非常非常的荣幸那我们也从他身上得到很多新的知识，还有得到很多来自于乌克兰最当地的观念。那我们也希望说这场战争能够早点结束。那最后要用一句乌克兰语 Slava Ukraini， 希望你们能够早日的打赢这场胜战。以上就是这一集的军事相对论，感谢您的收听，我是向正维，我们下一集再见，拜拜。